Welcome to the Hobby School podcast. Whether you're a seasoned hobbyist or just getting started, Hobby School is the perfect place to learn something new. My name is Dr. Destiny Kopp, and I'm your host of the podcast. But before we jump into our episode for today, the only thing I ask is that if you enjoyed the episode, please share with a friend and give us an honest review on your favorite podcast platform. This helps us get out the content to more people. I also want to invite you to get on our wait list for our next Hobby School Online Learning Summit. These are free to attend, and you can find the link to join at hobbyschool.com, which is also in our podcast show notes. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the episode. And my special guest today is Lyn Croyle. Lyn is a blogger and plant-based recipe creator with approximately 20 years experience in food service. She has a BS degree in nutrition and dietetics and has extraordinary proficiency in cooking and creating recipes. Lyn, I am super excited to chat with you today and to talk about this. We're going to be talking about how to get started eating vegetarian meals. And I'm so excited to delve in. But before we begin with all the great questions I have for you today, can you tell our good audience a little bit more about you, how you help people, and how you got started in this?
Sure, Destiny. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast. This is like one of my favorite topics to talk about. So I'm really, really thrilled to be here. So my experience with vegetarian eating started probably about 10 years ago. I had like something that I did every April when Earth Month would roll around, where I would commit to doing something that would be good for the planet for a month. And they were usually really small things, but one year I decided that I wanted to try eating vegetarian for a month. And so I dived in and I did it. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed how I felt. I enjoyed exploring different foods, and it just kind of stuck with me. And so over the years, I've gone back and forth between, a vegetarian and more flexitarian diet. I've dabbled a little bit in eating vegan, but for the most part, I do, consistently eat vegetarian meals, as part of my lifestyle.
And I definitely want to dig into this because this is a topic that I don't know a tremendous amount about. Here we eat about everything. And I've always loved kind of eating vegetables and, that I love salads and that sort of thing. So I've always thought, maybe I should try that and see how it works for me. So can you talk about a little bit about what is a vegetarian diet? And what foods can you eat as a vegetarian versus some of the other things that you just mentioned there, which I didn't even catch them all, vegan and another one that you mentioned too.
Oh, the flexitarian diet. So the flexitarian, we'll start with the flexitarian. It's the broadest. It's probably what, it's where you maybe experiment with, some of your meals are normal, like maybe meat-based meals, but then you're also incorporating, fish, and you're incorporating vegetables, you're having some vegetarian meals. Whereas with the vegetarian diet, you're strictly eating, mostly products that come from plants. Vegetarian diet does allow for dairy products, some cheeses, milk, obviously, and then also eggs. And then the vegan diet, which is much more strict, really, it takes all of those animal products out. So you're eating only things that are coming from plants.
And I think if I were going to do this, I would be more of a vegetarian because I like the dairy products and the cheeses and the eggs and stuff. So you talked a little bit about a vegan diet. So let's dig into that before. You talked about a little bit about the vegetarian versus vegan. And it sounds like vegan is super, a lot more strict, if you would. Talk about that and what you can eat and what you can't eat as a vegan.
So as a vegan, you can eat beans, whole grains, fruits, and vegetables. And then like for, I think the biggest struggle for most people when it comes to a vegan diet is a lot of questions come up about protein. There are good protein sources that are vegan. But I do find it to be more challenging. It's just more challenging. It's more challenging outside of your house because, it's harder to rely that everyone's really following the same kind of rules and guidelines, because it can be some vegans may even not consume honey because honey comes from bees. So it can definitely be a little more difficult. Whereas with I think a vegetarian diet is a really good place to start. And then if you find that it works for you, like you can transition into maybe exploring eliminating more, more foods that would be more in a vegan diet.
So we know that there's a lot of health benefits with eating fruits and vegetables. Can you talk about a little bit about what are the benefits of being a vegetarian?
Sure. So there's health benefits. So, plants are lower in cholesterol, you're eating less saturated fats in most cases, if you're eating whole foods. Also, there's a sustainability that it's good for our planet and it's good for the environment. I don't have any specific, statistics to quote, but, growing plants takes much less resources on our planet than it does to like raise cattle and, chickens to feed the world. And I feel like that one, it doesn't have to be an all or nothing in that. Like you could just make one small change could make an impact in how that impacts our environment. And then also I find it's a great way to add variety to your meals, like just trying some new things. And then it also can be a way to reduce your grocery bill, which I feel like it can be a really big one these days. Like a bag of dry beans is going to cost you it depends on where you live, but anywhere between like $2 and $3. And if you compare, and that's going to feed 4 to 6 people. Whereas, a pound of meat is going to cost substantially more than that. So, there can be some ways to help it be more, to help you be more frugal, I think, with your grocery expenditures.
And I think everybody's interested in that, right? Our groceries have just skyrocketed in the past few years. I feel like mine's almost doubled. I'm probably exaggerating there, but that's how I feel. So let's say that we want to get started and we're going to dip our toes into being a vegetarian. Vegan might not be, might not be on our radar screen right now, but definitely being a vegetarian. So can you talk about some difficulties that we might face when we're just getting started and give us some tips there?
Sure. So I think that, first of all, I think the best thing that anyone can do is just start small. So you've got to kind of figure out where you're at. If you're not eating any vegetarian meals, it might be very hard to just jump all in and be like, okay, I'm going to be a vegetarian. And it might also be, you also might have difficulties if you're in a household where you're feeding a family or other people that they're just very resistant. So like one of the things that I recommend if you're not eating any vegetarian meals is just to start slow. It could be as simple as like you're making spaghetti sauce and you're going to take half of the ground meat out and put in half lentils. And then, you can slowly transition. You can even start with a smaller percentage of lentils and then kind of slowly increase it till you have something that is completely, without any meat. I find that that's a really good way to get started, because not only is it easier for people making the transition, but it's physically easier. Particularly beans and legumes can be a little taxing on the digestion system, even if you're not eating them all the time. And once you start eating them, it does get easier. You don't constantly have those problems. So that's one thing that I feel like kind of helps make the transition a little easier. Another difficulty is eating out of the house. Mm-hmm. That one, even to this day, can be a struggle for me, especially if you're going to a restaurant, and even more difficult sometimes if you're going to someone's house. So some things that you can do to set yourself up is, first kind of have the conversation with yourself, like how important is it to you to really stick with eating a vegetarian? Are you willing to compromise? And if the answer is no, you want to stick with it, then it's a good idea to explore restaurant menus. I mean, nowadays you can find all that stuff online, so you can you can kind of choose the restaurant that works for you better. But then if you have no choice in the situation, you've at least had a chance to look at the menu and kind of make some decisions ahead of time of what you can eat. And if you're going to someone's house, ask to bring something. Like, I feel like a lot of times these days, people don't mind if you bring something. And so you can make it so that you have at least one thing to eat there at whatever event you're going to. And I'm sorry. And then also, hunger can also be another difficulty. There is this perception, as a vegetarian or vegan, we often get, well, how do you get your protein? Aren't you hungry all the time? And if you're eating a wide variety of foods, like, that shouldn't be a problem. If your idea of eating vegetarian is to just eat pasta with tomato sauce on it, you're going to be hungry because there's no protein in that. You've just got pasta, you've got white pasta, and you've got tomato sauce, and there's nothing that is really going to keep you going. So I think it's really about combining the right, types of foods, making sure that you're eating whole grains, you're eating lots of, plant-based protein in there. And planning also helps with that you've got it kind of mapped out what you're going to have for the week.
So I love the tips that you have, and I can only imagine how difficult it would be for a vegetarian to go out and to eat at a restaurant. But are you finding that more and more restaurants nowadays are having vegetarian options on the menu?
It is much easier, but I still feel like it can be. It's much easier. And I mean, and now you can even find restaurants that are solely vegetarian and vegan, and even vegan, but it can still be a challenge. Like, for me, I try to stay away from dairy, not because of I want to eat vegan, but because I have a difficult time eating dairy. So it can be challenging for me if I go out and I want to eat vegetarian, but there's cheese on things like it. So it definitely is easier than it was, but it isn't always, it's not always clear. And I think it depends too on where you live. Larger cities are more apt to have more options, where I think in smaller areas where meat is still, a big focus, it may be more difficult.
So Lyn, before we wrap it up here, can you give us some tips on how to get started?
Well, the first thing that I would say is start small.
Okay.
Just start with a little change. Don't feel like you've got to jump in and suddenly make, a whole new lifestyle. I find that by starting small and getting started that way, you're also more likely to stick with it as a new habit. The other thing is to experiment with other foods, like other cuisines. There's a lot of cultures that have a lot of vegetarian dishes that they're just naturally vegetarian. So that's a good place to start. And also to expand your recipe bank that you go to every week for planning. And also to make over your favorite dishes first. Like, my favorite thing to eat in the whole world is tacos. And so if it was me getting started to eat, I would start with that first and experiment with how I can make, vegetarian tacos that I love, because I love tacos in any shape or form. So I think playing around with the foods that you like the most and that your family likes the most is a great way to get started.
And I will have to say, Mexican's my favorite food also. So what vegetarian Mexican dishes do you make?
Oh, well, that's an easy one, I feel like. I mean, I do tacos, enchiladas. I even have a tofu fajita recipe. There's
Nice.
lots of possibilities. Yeah.
Oh, well, Lyn, can you tell people where they can find you?
Sure. So my blog is Cook, Eat, Live, Love. It's all one word.com. And I'm also Cook, Eat, Live, Love on social media platforms. So you can find me on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. And I have a vegetarian getting started guide that you will find the link to in the show notes. And that is a great way to get started. It's got recipes for an entire day of cooking vegetarian and lots of tips to get you started.
And Lyn, we will make sure that all of those links are in the show notes so everybody can find you. And thank you so much for joining us today and giving us all these great tips about how to eat vegetarian.
Well, thank you so much, Destiny. It was a pleasure. My pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening today. Don't forget to sign up for the waitlist so you'll be the first to know when our next free Hobby School online learning summit launches. The link is in the show notes for this episode, or you can go to hobbyschool.com, and that's Hobby School with school without an H in it. Talk soon.